Welcome. I'm April Hershey, the superintendent here at Warwick, and if you are looking for the honors tea, you're in the wrong place. The honors tea for the middle school is actually being held over in the high school auditorium. This meeting tonight is our feasibility study update, so hopefully you're all in the right place tonight. This is actually the second in a series of public forums that we have been holding to get input from you about what direction we are going with our feasibility study. And for anyone who's new to this, we started about 2 years ago looking ahead to the year 2022-23 when 3 of our school buildings are up for renovation for their 20-year renovation projects. Those schools are John Beck Elementary, Kissel Hill Elementary, and Warwick High School. So we've partnered with our architects, RLPS, to take a look at those buildings. We've done comprehensive looks at the different systems of the buildings to determine what needs work. We've done focus groups. At about this time last year, we did several focus groups with different teachers and students and parents and administration and the board to get more information. We brought all of that together and came back in the fall with our first public forum where we showed 6 options for those construction projects. Since that time, the board has continued to discuss the feasibility study in our public meetings. The Building and Property Committee and Finance and Legal Committee have had little conversations about financing and different pieces of this project. At this point, we have narrowed those 6 options down to 3 based on a lot of the feedback that we've received. So the purpose of tonight is to show you the 3 options we have. We have some preliminary costs associated with those 3 options. By all means, they are not completely comprehensive, but they're starting to give us an idea of what we're looking at cost-wise. And then our goal is, after we share that information with you, to field any questions that you have and to continue to solicit input from you. As we have had available for the last year, we have an email address available for questions or feedback that you wish to provide. That email address is feasibilitystudy@warwicksd.org, and we'll give that to you again at the end of the presentation. Certainly you're welcome to email me or any of the team that is here to share with you tonight. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Erin Hoffman from RLPS, who will be taking us through the presentation this evening. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you. So these are just the things that we're going to be discussing tonight. Dr. Hershey already went through the progress update, so I'll probably go through that pretty quickly. But we'll look at the baseline option and then the 2 other options, A and B. We'll discuss a little bit of 21st century learning and then get into a little bit of high-level detail on the building modifications that we're looking to move forward and what those project costs could potentially be. As Dr. Hershey said, these are very high-level numbers, and there's a lot more that needs to go into this information. So with that, really where we are is at the red arrow in discussion at this point of these 3 options, as Dr. Hershey had mentioned, but there is a lot more time moving forward for discussions and refinement of what we're talking about. So with this first option, this is the baseline option. This is basically to maintain the school district as it is, using a K-6 as an elementary, 7-8 at the middle school, and a 9-12 at the high school. This really takes the systems, brings them up to today's standards, really fixes the deficiencies in the schools, but really doesn't address any of the other educational or curriculum changes that might happen in the schools. So this just gives you an overview of the numbers for the 3 schools that Dr. Hershey mentioned, Beck, Kissel Hill, and the high school. And you'll notice the high school has a quite significant difference from the elementaries, and that's because when we did the renovations and additions back in early 2000, we did not touch a majority of the high school. So there's a lot more work that needs to go into the high school at this point. So with options A and B, option A is to make the Kissel Hill Elementary the pre-K K center. That would be for the entire district, so all pre-K and K would go to that school. Then Beck and Lidditz will become the 1 through 4, and Bonfield will become a 5-6 building. The middle school will stay the same, and so will the high school. So it's just a change in grade configuration at this point. All of the buildings would be maintained in the school district. With this option, you'll see that there's additional costs, and this includes things that will be affected by the curriculum and the education program, bringing in that 21st century learning and enhancing the programs at these 3 schools. You also notice that there's a line for the athletic field house. Approximately 10 years ago, the district looked into building a field house and concession area between what is now the field hockey field and the football stadium. So that you'll see in both of the options, A and B, as a potential, and that helps in the relief of some of the issues that are happening at the high school. The high school has a lot of impact in the athletic area that we need to deal with, so this may alleviate some of those pressures in that area. Option B would be a pre-K to 4th grade in the 3 elementaries as discussed earlier. And then 5, 6 again would be at Bondfield. Middle school would stay the same, and so would the high school. With this option, one of the things that we've gone through with the school board so far is it's very similar in cost. It's really the program and the educational and curriculum pieces that are different between the two. So this would be that K to 4 elementary as opposed to a pre-K, K center, and a 1 through 4. All of the other things, such as the changes at the high school and the athletic field house, would be the same. So we went back through all the comments and the information that we collected and really looked at the deficiencies in all of those 3 schools that we have been discussing with John Beck, Kissel Hill, and the high school. And you can see the deficiencies listed, but a lot of that has to do with the systems in the building. Systems wear out in buildings and need to be replaced. They're all getting to the end of their life, and that becomes a non-repetitive maintenance cost for the school district to undertake. So the scope of work includes mechanical systems, electrical systems, technology, which the school district is doing a great job of updating technology right now. So there's a lot of impact that's happening on that technology level, especially for 21st century learning at this point. And then also looking at changes in the casework and replacing some of the furniture and finishings for the 21st century learning piece. So this just gives you an idea of the plan we're looking at. The gray is the area that we added or renovated in the last renovation piece. The light green area is the minor renovations that we did previously and have to go back and touch again. And the darker green is the area that was not touched at all in the last renovation piece. So that was where the main concentration would be. Mechanical, electrical would be throughout the entire building. Kissel Hill is very similar to John Beck. Same system analysis of the deficiencies and the same concept in the scope of work, really looking at the casework, the 21st century learning pieces, and then the systems again, meaning mechanical and electrical. This again, the gray is the additions that were completed in the 2000s. The light green is the renovation pieces, and the dark green is areas that were not touched. So those would get, again, the most work. With the high school, there's quite a difference in the deficiencies, and this really has to do with the bottom of the list. You'll notice that the athletic areas are pretty significant. I'm sure most of you who have been to some sporting events have realized there's no air conditioning, which becomes a very big challenge for the athletes as well as the spectators. There's also some other challenges in the building of how circulation works, how the public passes by all of the locker room areas and the students and the athletes crossing all the same area becomes a big challenge for the athletic department. So the scope of work in the high school, again, is the systems, mechanical, electrical, and looking at 21st century learning, but has a big impact on the athletic area, reorganizing, reanalyzing, and reassessing where people, spectators, athletes all end up going throughout that area. So again, the same concept with the colors. The gray were the renovated areas in 2000, additions in 2000. The light green is the renovated, and the dark green and the bright green are the areas that we would be having most impact on. So we took a look at what impacts it would be on the athletic area specifically. And one of the major things was the concession area is right in the middle and becomes a point of an area of congestion, thank you. So it's a bottleneck, and all of the teams come by that area. Anyone going up to the restrooms are coming out of the same areas, and that causes a conflict. So we looked at adding an addition onto the front, out by the main entrance for that concession area. Another one of the big challenges in the athletics are, where does all the stuff go? The storage is a really, really big issue. So we looked at adding on to the one area off of the locker rooms. There's also minor things in the locker room area, such as there's nowhere for teams to meet during intermission or halftime of any of the games. So how can we rearrange the locker rooms and look at where the lockers are located to be able to open that up? With the field house, this was more of an entire area for the athletics on the outside. So this really shows number 14 field is your football field. Number 15 is the field hockey field. And in between, you'll notice there's a concourse. That is where new locker rooms would be located for football teams or any outdoor sporting events that would happen, as well as concession, bathrooms, and ticket areas for games that are going on. So again, as I mentioned, this was designed about 8 years ago, and it was tabled at that time. It was part of the economy started to change, and that's why this was tabled, because it wasn't economically responsible at this point to build this. However, we're noticing that by not having this area, it is impacting the high school and the athletics in the high school tremendously, with the amount of storage and being able to help all the teams that are out in the fields. So again, as I mentioned, there's locker rooms, and you'll see there is plenty of women's and men's restrooms available for the field house. So one of the things I mentioned was a 21st century learning piece. Again, you look at the pictures and you see the one is the traditional, and the next picture is really where we are today. Warwick has done a great job in putting and bringing in technology, so that's a great one-to-one initiative moving forward. But there's other pieces of 21st century learning, and it really comes down to that flexibility. One of the big pieces is the change in the learning environment. Teachers are teaching different today. It's really project-based learning. It's not so much memorization anymore, but it's hands-on, and how does that impact in the building? Again, the school district has done a great job of the 4 C's of education, and again, it's collaboration, creativity, communication, and critical thinking, and that has been a huge driver for the educational program in the school district. But what does that mean to the building? How does that impact the spaces that you already have? And the key word is really flexibility. What can we do to make these spaces flexible so that the teachers can achieve the educational process that they really need with students? Some of those things include makers labs or fab labs or robotics labs. So you'll see here, just having that open area, how do we create that flexibility so there's not desks and tables everywhere? How do students learn differently? Again, here you'll see groups of students working in different areas in one single classroom. How do we handle that? And one of the pieces is really the furniture. Here you'll see high school level at desks. You'll see the chairs are on wheels, glass into a room next door where the teachers can see another small group working but still teaching with this small group in this room. And again, the technology piece, which the district's doing a great job of providing for students, but how do we have to accommodate that in furniture and making sure the students can use those pieces effectively? So again, with the overall costs, there are other pieces, as Dr. Hershey had mentioned. These are some of the soft costs, the things that don't actually go into the bricks and sticks of the building. And these are the things that we're still working out. We're understanding what that means to these buildings, but this gives you a roundabout idea of what a total project would look like. Some of the other things that the school district has looked at are transportation and teaching staff, and what impact does that have on these options. And in reality, there hasn't been that much change. Transportation has been able to be handled without much change, just more of a bell schedule, I believe, and when students would arrive and leave the schools, as opposed to bringing in another shift of transportation. Again, with staffing, the reallocation, there would not be too much change. It just would be where people are located, not adding additional staff, but really looking at what the positions are that are there now. Again, with the mechanical, electrical systems, improvements in the energy in the buildings, and looking at the maintenance and the staffing would really be the same impact as what you see today. So with that, we're going to open up this evening for questions and answers. Absolutely.
So just a few things I want to highlight for you before we move into the question and answer piece. I hope that you can see that we heard what you had to say through our focus groups and also through our last public forum. We heard you say that we didn't want our students to have too many transitions between different buildings. We heard you tell us about 6th grade, that you didn't necessarily want 6th grade in the elementary school and you didn't necessarily want them in the middle school. It depends if you have a 6th grader and where they land. So we're not choosing to change anything at the middle school. If we choose, we could take 5th and 6th grade and house them together at Bonfield Elementary School, but we still have the option to keep the grade configurations just as they are. And we also heard loud and clear that pre-K is a priority for us here at Warwick. I know that I shared some statistics with you last time about the money that is spent in early childhood education shows great benefit later on in students' education. We have applied for the Pennsylvania Pre-K Counts Grant, and we're hoping to be successful in that. If that is the case, we'll have money to help offset classroom costs and hopefully an instructor in that classroom as well. Whatever we choose here, pre-K is something that is on our docket to offer to all of our students who would need such services. So I just want you to know that we have heard your feedback, and those are things that have helped to formulate the direction that we've gone with these 3 options. So, do we have questions? Somebody want to be the... Hi.
Hi, I'm Robert Swords. We raised 5 children in Warwick, and we now have 4 grandchildren that are going to be shortly going to the Warwick schools. So I'm advocating for the next generation, actually. And my question before you had said about pre-K being a priority was, is there a mandate that Warwick needs to do pre-K? Because that seems to be the precursor, other than the maintenance, building maintenance items, which I don't think many people are going to argue much with that. It's the new structuring and the additional costs and what you call 21st century learning, which I'm still a little skeptical about. But so the thought is why would Warwick feel that it needs to fund and support pre-K when the parents that desire to have pre-K already have a number of outlets that they could take advantage of that, whether it's Head Start or local churches, or we do have 2 grandchildren that go to pre-K, and they go to a neighborhood pre-K, which is not part of the public school district. And I just don't know why we need to restructure that. Now our 4 grandchildren, one's going to be going to the middle school, one's going to be going to Kissel Hill, one's going to be going to Bonfield, one's going to be going to Lidditz. And where right now they're, walking together down the street, all going to the same school. And it just doesn't make sense to me when I read that all these different options. My option was the first one, do the maintenance and pretty much stop there. And as far as the economic argument that you made 8 years ago, well, we didn't have the economy. I don't know that we have the economy now. If it's an economic decision, I don't know that things are much different now. If it is a learning, if it's a construction and maintenance decision, we understand that. If it is an education opportunity decision, maybe we need to look at studies of, is education that much better than it was 20 years ago? So I think first and foremost in my mind was, why do we need to fund the pre-K?
Okay. Thank you for your question, Mr. Swords, and you have a lot in that question. So not every child who has the need for pre-K does have access to it. And so our goal would be to provide pre-K for those students most at risk for not being able to have success in school. And those are the students that we would target as our first group of students we would want to have for pre-K. Certainly it would be a dream to have every child have access to pre-K, but that's definitely not where we're looking to start. We're looking to start small and to find those students who are most in need of that. It is not a mandate at this point, but the research is very clear that students who have access to pre-K, who would have been an at-risk student before, can gain a lot in that time here in the public school. You also talked about the economy, and certainly, as I've said at our last public forum, and I will say it again here, the mantra of this board is to provide the very best possible educational experiences to our students while being fiscally responsible to our community. That is how we make all of our decisions. You heard Aaron talk about the Fieldhouse piece as an option, and it is listed as an option. The board has made no decisions about moving forward on that at this point. So everything that we're doing at this point that we're really focused on is that 20-year anniversary of time to look at systems in these buildings. That option is up there because back in 2008, before I even came here as superintendent, there was discussion about the Fieldhouse and upgrading those athletic facilities. It made sense for us to take a look at that now based on the deficiencies that we're having in the high school athletic area, even with the locker rooms that we're using now for students who are taking physical education classes. Again, we've got 2-3 years till we have to make these decisions, so we're exploring all options. But thank you for your question.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Pam Brunken, and one thing I just wanted to clarify with the base option, it didn't have the $5 million allocation for the field house, so I wanted to know if that was an option, if the base option was, if they went with that option.
It absolutely could be.
Okay, great.
We put the base option there as kind of the bare minimum without going too far, outside the scope of the things that need to be done to the buildings. But yes, it absolutely could be added to the first option.
Okay, great.
Good
And then
question.
my other question would be too, is if more funding, some of those funds were going to be used towards to maximizing school security and everything, and just to make our schools as safe as possible.
Absolutely. That's another one of the tenets of the work we do, is to ensure that students are in a safe and affirming learning environment every day, no exceptions. We have a very comprehensive all hazards plan that talks about everything from personnel to physical structures. And so this is a great time for us to take a look at these 3 structures as well as the other 3 to make sure that we have the best possible security measures in place. So that will be part of this whole work. Great question. I had seen it here, over here.
My name is Bunny Buckwalter, and back in the mid-90s, we moved the 6th grade from the middle school back to the elementary school. I was on the board at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very concerned about you segmenting the children in all of these different buildings. I think the joy is to have the children, as many children, grade levels in a building together, because those younger children can look up to the older children as to this is what I strive for. The older children have that opportunity, if you put it in your programming, to go down and read to the younger kids, to help them with things. And when you put them, 4 grades in this building, 2 grades in that building, 2 grades in that building, there isn't that opportunity. And I am very, very concerned about that. I am also concerned about the cost to the taxpayer. How are you going to service this kind of debt? And another piece is you have what the field house is going to cost, but then it sounds like there's a lot of other things on the athletic end, and I'm wondering what those costs are, and are we educating students or are we raising athletes?
Okay, thank you. There was a lot in that question as well. Your first question or your first comment was about segmenting students, and certainly we hear that, and that was something we heard loud and clear in all of our feedback that we took back in last spring and also in the community forum that we heard back in the fall. Certainly, we have reduced the options that had students in 2 grades at a time, except for this option that has the 5-6 building for Bonfield and the one that has the pre-K center. So we hear loud and clear what you say about transitions. There is research on both sides of that coin to ensure that you have older students who are mentoring younger students, and I want you to know we are doing those things right now. The idea of the 5-6 building together would allow us to do some very specific programming for students at that age level, but certainly it's only one of our 3 options here at this point, or actually in 2 of our 3 options at this point. As far as raising athletes, we think that athletics and the arts and altruism for all of our students are a very important part of the well-roundedness that we offer to our students. Certainly we want to make sure that they're in facilities that are safe, facilities where they can be able to shine and do the best that they can. Certainly athletics does not come before academics. That's always going to be number 1 for us. But we're certainly taking a look at all the options that are available to us at this point. Thank you for your question.
Hi, I'm Sherry Klein. I teach here. I'm Sherry Klein. I teach here, but I'm also a resident here, a taxpayer. And I had a question with if the 2 options that have a 5-6 building, are they looking to keep only the outside walls and the inside, they would start from scratch to make it the 21st learning and all the different things that are needed? Or are they looking to take the existing inside walls and just making some small adjustments
So first
to
of all,
accommodate
I'm
the
they.
5-6?
We're all they. All of
Yes,
you are they.
I'm not. No, I
So
don't.
we're all making
yes.
this decision together. I just want to make sure that everybody
no,
understands
yeah.
that there's not some other being out there
No,
who are
I-
making
no,
these
I
decisions. We're all
understand.
making these decisions together. As far as 21st century learning is considered at this point, we're not looking to necessarily take down a bunch of walls or do those kinds of things in any of these options. What we're talking about is flexible furniture, some ability to open up maybe 2 classrooms together so that you can have larger spaces together, but we're not looking to, take down everything inside the building and start fresh. That's not the intent. Very good question.
Hi, my name's Katie Drakely. My question is about the feasibility of the busing and transportation. I have a son who will eventually, hopefully, go to Lidditzel, or maybe not, depending on kind of what happens with the different programmings. And I know that busing and transportation is already sometimes a headache, and with if times change or whatever. So I guess I'm just wondering how that's going to work if there's all these different transitions. And my second question is, I used to teach here, and I taught special ed, and our kids have a really hard time with transitions. And so I guess, not as a parent of a special needs child, but knowing how much I had to work with my students' transition, and they had, they had only 2 years to learn a building and then go to another school. Just how, where is that support going to come from? Because I feel like that's going to fall on the parents, and I don't know that all those parents are exactly thinking of that, or maybe they are, and they're very concerned of all these different transitions and how that would impact those students.
Sure. So only one of the plans has multiple transitions in it, the one that has the Kissel Hill being the pre-K, K center, and then the 5-6 building. The other 2 plans only add 1 additional, and the other plan adds 1 additional, and the other one keeps things as they are. Certainly, as we support students in transitions now by allowing them to come visit the schools and spend time with their teachers, I think we would do those same things if we were adding additional transitions, having them visit the building, especially for our students who have additional needs. We would make additional opportunities for them to start to get to know what that new building would be like, et cetera. But again, it's not set in stone that we're going to go to either of those particular situations. As far as transportation is concerned, we haven't gone too far down this road. What we have looked at is that if we were to go to the option that just has the 5-6 building and keep everything else K-4, all we would really need to do is stagger the start time of the K-4 buildings and the 5-6 buildings. So students would probably drop off first at the K-4 buildings and then go on to John Bonfield Elementary School to drop off the 5-6 kids. So that might be a 10 to 15 minute time difference. You would not have to add an additional bus route.
Hi, Karen Weibel.
Hi, Karen.
Formerly of Lidditz Council and now the Planning Commission. I do encourage you to reach out sooner rather than later to the borough to look at the transportation needs that you may or may not need. It's no secret that traffic in the morning and the afternoon is a little chaotic here. So any changes that you may need to make to accommodate whatever your decisions are could have a fairly incredible impact on the rest of the borough. Most people don't realize that 5 of the 6 buildings of the school district are in the borough limits. And so things get a little tight some days. But I encourage you to reach out, and I know that we'd be more than happy to sit down with the maps and start drawing lines.
Yes, we enjoy a very close relationship with the borough leadership. And at this point, we don't see any huge changes necessary for transportation, but certainly we will continue to have that conversation. Thank you, Karen. Way up there.
I'm Alexis Floor. I had a question. I apologize for being late. I wanted to know if we could put up on the screen the different options again. And just to keep in mind, if we do the different options that have some different buildings, it occurred to me last night that our schools are run a lot by the PTO and things. And if you have more than one child, most parents, I mean, we already have a hard time getting people to come in and help. And if they have more than one child, they're most likely not going to participate in more than one place. And the Warwick Education Foundation is wonderful, and maybe they could somehow tie it together and just be one big, huge thing, which I don't know how that would work because we already have trouble getting parents involved. And when you make it bigger, it's less intimate and people don't seem to be involved. But that was a concern that I thought, as well as many of the things that everyone said, and I know there's a lot of work being spent on this and already has been spent on it. But I think the 21st century thing is fabulous. I wish there was an imaginative way to keep the K through 6 the way that it is, and have the elementary schools, but also have that. I want it all. That's what I want.
Me too.
But that's nothing less than what I always want.
Right, right. So I put up option A here, which is the one with the most transitions. You have a very excellent point that parent involvement is not what it used to be. And we have lots of both parents working, we have lots of people who are involved in lots of things, and certainly we would want to support our parents the best we could, no matter what configuration we're looking at here. So I hear what you're saying, and certainly anything that we can do to encourage parent participation, we're going to continue to do. I just want to make sure that everybody understands what 21st century learning means. It doesn't just mean technology. What we've been embedding in all of our curriculum and instruction for the last 2 years here is the 21st century skills that we want our students to be able to demonstrate. Communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking. Several years ago, I was able to have a conversation with Troy Clare, who is the president and CEO of Clare Global. And I said to him, Troy, what is it that you're looking for from our students when they graduate, if you would want to employ them at your business? And he said, I need them to be able to think their way out of a paper bag, and I need them to be able to get along with other people. I can teach them the rest. Certainly that doesn't absolve us of all the things that we're required to teach our students to be able to know and do. However, those are things that maybe we don't always pay enough attention to, so we want to provide opportunities for our students to work collaboratively, to be able to communicate with one another. And so that's why you see us looking at, instead of desks necessarily in rows, things on wheels where students can write on the wall or write on the desk surface. That's what 21st century skills means. It doesn't mean that everybody's sitting in front of a computer and learning from an online program. There's some of that, indeed. We certainly need our students to be able to be literate in all the kinds of technology that are necessary for them to be successful in today's world. Other questions? Over here.
I am really concerned about the transitions in the elementary school ages. So I would really like to know a lot more about the 5th and 6th school and what the advantages are of that and what you feel you'd like to gain from that. One of the things I am most concerned about is community building. I feel like in our elementary schools we have the opportunity to not only build community with students, but with adults, and a lot of adults, and I know my daughter's in 2nd grade. She looks up to 6th grade teachers. She looks up to 4th grade teachers. As we're involved in more activities as she's getting older, she's connecting with older students, and she's really excited to be one of those older students, but she's having chances to interact and grow. And I feel like as we're talking about these resilience issues and we're talking about drug addiction and we're talking about depression, it's an opportunity for our kids to learn about community. And it's also, like Alexa said, with parents, having parents in the school and having the same parents in the school and getting to know those parents and having other members in the community that you then go on to recognize and know and can go to. And I feel like the more changes we have, the less opportunity we have for those connections. And I feel also that 7th and 8th grade, it is no mystery that that is a really difficult age for all of our children. I mean, when puberty hits, it is just a difficult time. And I question that segmenting 5th and 6th grade is just starting that process early. Sure. And I feel like we are already asking our children to be adults way too young and asking them to take on way too much. And I feel like taking that opportunity for them to be the leaders of a school and be mentors to younger people I feel like we're really cheating them, and I question what kind of educational components would outweigh that. And my other question, in addition to the benefits of the 5th and 6th, is how our growth, how growth is factoring into this. I noticed at our school, our 6th grade class is much larger than our kindergarten class. So I didn't know what we were thinking about that way.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm going to start with the growth piece first. We're actually in a negative growth situation at this point. When we had our community forum back in the fall, we talked about the fact that over the last 10 years, Warwick School District is down by over 600 students. We talked about a variety of different reasons for that. One of them is the limited building area that we have here, especially for lower income families or families with lots of children. So the building that has happened in the 9 years that I've been superintendent has basically been for retirees and senior citizens. And so there's definitely, we've noticed what that looks like in our trends. So at this point, we have space in all of our buildings. Some of our earlier options out of the 6 had us closing elementary schools because we have enough space to do that. So certainly in these options, we have plenty of room for any kind of growth that we might realize in the next 25 years. Although we did look at the state projections for birth rate, and we also hired a firm to take a look at population around here, and we don't anticipate that happening. We're in good shape as far as growth is concerned. And I just want to say I hear exactly what you're saying about transition. I hear exactly what you're saying about 5th and 6th grade. Certainly we see that there could be pros and cons to all of that. Anytime that you put specific grade levels together, you can really hone in on what your library looks like, and that information can be all those resources that are there are targeted towards students of that age group, that ability level. The same thing is true for the teaching that could happen there. But again, which do we weigh more? Do we weigh the transition as something that we don't want, or do we want to be able to have some really focused education for those 5th and 6th graders? I heard exactly what you said about resilience and about addiction and all those sorts of things. We certainly see that 5th and 6th grade age where we could really do some specific social and emotional work with students at that age before they hit the middle school. But again, there are pros and cons to all. That's why we're having these discussions, and I appreciate your input and feedback. Mrs. Morell, the microphone is coming your way.
And I was wondering, not that Warwick has ever compared ourselves to any other district, but I was wondering if you can tell me, as your homework has been completed, I believe other school districts, our neighboring school districts, may have other buildings similar to what you're speaking about tonight, where some buildings have a 5th and 6th grade building, a K-4 building. I was wondering if you could address how you have spoken to some of those districts and how that's working in other neighboring districts that surround us.
Yes. Ephrata School District has a 5-6 building, as a 5-6 wing of a building that's part of their intermediate school. Manheim Township has a 5-6 building. Annville-Cleona, where I taught about 150 years ago, had a K-2 building, a K-1 building, a 2-3 building, and a 4-5-6. So there are pros and cons to all of this. Certainly, depending who you talk to, you're going to get a different story about everything. Certainly, we just wanted to take a look at this as an opportunity to provide some different kinds of tools and education to those 5, 6 students. I know one of the things we heard loud and clear from all the focus groups is that idea of where does 6th grade go. We had another person here who had been on the board back when the decision was made to put 6th grade back in the elementary school, who actually quoted Dr. Bonfield, the superintendent who was here at that time, about how that decision was made. Really, it comes down to where are you with your child? If you have a 6th grader, you want them staying in the elementary school. If you have a kindergartner, you want 6th graders to be in the middle school. So I've heard, all kinds of different feedback from people as far as this is concerned, and we were trying to address that in looking at that different grade configuration as one of these options. Hi, John.
And this is our first year at Warwick. We have a 1st grader and a 4th grader at John Beck. And so I can tell you, coming into this school a year ago, I was Warwick's biggest critic. And about 2 months into it, John Beck has been great. Teachers, staff, everybody. So love the way that it's set up now. K to 6, our kids, they do look up to the older kids there. Coming out of private school, I would say that even in 3rd grade, my son was behind where he should have been in 4th grade. So the 21st century learning, just the entire piece of that, if you don't change anything since when I was at that school 30 years ago, your kids are going to be behind. So 21st century learning encompasses a lot of things. I think it's really important because I have seen the effects of not changing. As for transition, the biggest part of that for us was when my 4th grade son had to completely make new friends. I understand that's a little different. There's going to be people in his class moving to 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever. But that transition was really, really tough on him. And I saw that this year. With that being said, John Beck has been stellar and really appreciate Warwick School District.
Thank you, John. Other questions?
Hi, I'm Jess Brookhart. I have 3 children, 2 go to Kissel Hill, and 1 is not old enough to go yet. But I would echo the thoughts on community, keeping it K to 6, because I love what Kissel Hill does with the carnival, the musical. We have bus buddies, safety patrols, writing and reading buddies, just the volunteering that I can go to one school. I don't have to drive to 2 different schools to volunteer for elementary age. I do have a question about the transportation that had been talked about, as far as like you had talked about different times. If I have a walker, because we walk to Kissel Hill, and then my oldest gets to that 5th and 6th, which I wouldn't prefer anyway, but if that would happen, time-wise, would I be walking, running one to school, coming back, or waiting at the bus and then running the other one to school? I don't know how that would work. And as far as the pre-K, kindergarten used to be half-day, and then it was pushed to full. I have seen benefits of that because my middle child was in that transition, and he loved it and did great. But I am concerned that pre-K then becomes almost mandatory, even though I know pre-K and K are not mandatory in Pennsylvania. But you have that pressure that if your child does not go to pre-K, even when it is free, there's something wrong with you, or what's wrong with your decision. So I would be very, for those who really struggle, I would make that an option, but I would not be in favor of the pressure for that.
Understood. And certainly at this point, we're not looking to pressure anyone into pre-K. We're looking to assist those families who would need that. Yes.
So if you would have pre-K, would I put my 4-year-old on a bus at for 5 days for whole day? Is that what you're looking at?
I don't have those details at this point. We're still talking about what that might look like. When I was at Cocalico about 100 years ago, we did successfully receive a Pennsylvania pre-K counts grant, and our 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds each did half days, and their transportation was separate from that of all the other students. That doesn't, I'm not saying that's how it would look here. We certainly would have to have conversation about that. And certainly we would understand that a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old's needs are going to look different than a 6th grader's needs. Thank you for your input. Somebody else have a hand up? Over here. Getting your steps in tonight, Craig.
I'm working it.
You'll get your steps in today.
Hi, my name's Elaine Swords.
Hi, Elaine.
Hi. Getting back to the last question, as far as grants go, I understand how grants work. They last for a little bit of time, and then the school has to make a decision if they're going to continue it. And that is when the cost really gets assessed. And that at that point, then you already have teachers committed to that, so then you have like a union issue, and what do you do with the teachers at that point if the school district decides not to forgo or follow through with keeping up with that grant. Earlier, I had seen movable walls. I grew up, and this will date me, to a brand new middle school years ago where they had movable walls. Well, they got rid of them because it was too noisy.
Open classrooms. I went to a high school like that as well, scarred for life.
Exactly.
We're not going there.
Well, and that was just another one. But coming back to the cost as far as teachers, when I graduated from Millersville with a degree, there were a lot of people that didn't get jobs because there were so many teachers already within the system. Well, now a lot of my friends are starting to retire. So now I'm looking at a lot of this as if, let's say the 71 million, plus I think I saw on there 22.5% that we're not sure about as far as additional costs on one of the screens that you had there. And I'm looking at what's the feasibility study on our retirees in the school district, and how does that cost affect going forward? Because I also saw that Pennsylvania just recently assessed that their PACERS program is in crisis because they didn't plan ahead for 17 and 18, or 18 and 19, I think it was. So my concern is, we were the greatest or the coolest town in America for a while, but if we can't afford because of taxes, why would people want to come and move into our district? So I'm looking at, yes, most of the retirement communities are being built around here are for 55 and plus, and they don't have school-age kids.
That's right.
So therefore, the number of students that we will be having definitely will continue to decrease. So I know I said a lot in that, but...
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to have a hard time remembering everything. First, you talked about, yes, and our Chief Financial Officer, Nate Wirch, is here with me tonight. We've had at least 3 public meetings where we've talked about the financing of this debt. Currently, we are carrying debt from other projects that we've done, and the timing of this could not be more perfect. As that debt falls off, we will probably not have to borrow additional money because we'll be able to wrap this new debt into that. Did you want to speak to that, Mr. Wirch? And then maybe you could talk about PACERS too.
Obviously, school districts are faced with various costs, and you alluded to 2 of them, one being the personnel cost side of things as you look at salaries and benefits, the other being the debt service side. So our debt service coming up on the portion when this project is going to go into play, most of our debt service is falling off. Just to give you numbers that I'm sure you probably won't care about, we carry about $10 million a year in debt service payments. So that means up until now, when the projects are happening, we're dropping $10 million of debt off every single year. The cost of these projects in the $50 to $70 million range, they do what's called wraparound debt. So the debt's going to be added to the bottom of our schedule. As that drops off, we'll add it to it at that point. Otherwise, if you're trying to pay some of it off up front, you're going to have to add tax value on, or you're going to have to decrease expenses. It's just not feasible, so you add it on. So what the school board, Finance and Legal, Building and Property Committee are being very cognizant of right now is the cost of borrowing that debt and what the interest costs are when you look into those outer years, as it is right now. But as has been said in multiple forums at this point, we're not looking at adding in additional millage rate, additional tax increases related to this project. Our debt schedule is in a good enough position where you see some of our neighbors are adding 7% tax increases, 5% tax increases. Warwick has been, for the 5th year in a row now, within our allowable index as allowed by the state, so we are not looking to add any additional as part of that, but while being still very cognizant as far as what those interest costs are going forward. And then as it relates to the salaries and staffing part of it, that's an annual type thing. I mean, as we've looked at staffing components as part of this project, annually, as every position becomes open or as every grant becomes available, that's an annual type thing that really is an operational thing year to year and really not part of this project. Does that address most of them?
But does it affect in the long run, even though you're saying it's $10 million a month? We just had an assessment on our property taxes, so technically got an increase.
That's actually incorrect, if I can address that. Reassessment process, the school district is not allowed to collect 1 additional cent in revenue. That's part of the reassessment process. So the rule of thumb is that a third of people as part of reassessment will see their taxes go up, a third will stay the same, and a third will actually go down. But as part of the school district process, we are not allowed to collect 1 additional cent as part of the reassessment process. We're required to re-level our millage rate so that it's revenue neutral, and then only through the Act 1 allowable index that the school district is subject to every year are they allowed to increase taxes. So we actually don't collect any additional money as part of reassessment.
Add a lot of housing. Has that been figured in
Oh,
at
absolutely.
all with?
Yep.
Oh,
I mean,
it is. Okay.
Until the projects are
I was hoping it was
finalized,
free.
sorry. Until the projects are finalized and actually go through the assessment process, we can only essentially forecast what that will be because we have no idea what the assessment office is going to evaluate all those properties at. And then what we're unfortunately subject to all the time is assessment appeals. So what we've seen currently, just since the reassessment process started in November, when everybody got their new reassessed properties, to where we are as of the last file was May, we have picked up almost $100 million in assessed value. Now that's the increased value over what it was before, but that's absolutely built into the budget process that's going into next year now, as well as projected forward as part of our 3-year forecast leading up to this feasibility study.
Okay, so it's already been included.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
My name is Maura Pluta, and I have 5 children potentially coming into the district, 3 next year. But looking at Plan A, and I've heard this from others, it's concerning to me that I will have 4 or 5 kids in 5 different buildings. Thinking about coming as a parent, going to different events, back to school night, I've heard that from others. But my greatest concern is transportation. And I know that you briefly, I know others have said it, but you've briefly touched on it, and maybe that's because we haven't thought that deeply into it. But my children go to Lidditz. It is incredibly congested at all times. Drop off, pick up. I know everybody works hard to make it run smoothly. My home is located right on South Cedar. Cars are flying up and down. Lidditz Borough Police are there. I understand everybody's doing what they need to do to make it work, but it's concerning to me the possibility of a child waiting for a bus while I'm walking others to school. I also work in a company where I'm in a non-public school. I see some of these kids getting on a school bus at 6:30 in the morning because of the public district and just the transportation nightmare from that alone and kids being on the buses for a while. So not to bring it back, I know it sounds like maybe we haven't thought that deeply into transportation, but that's concerning. part of the reason that we stayed in Lidditz and are continuing to want to stay here is because our children can walk to Lidditz L, to the middle school, to the high school. That's important to us. Lots of shenanigans can happen walking 2-3 blocks home. So that's just concerning to me. My location, would I have a child walking to Bondfield, down Main Street? I don't know. So the safety piece of that, not to bring it back up,
No problem.
but
No, we totally hear what you're saying. We haven't gone super deep into transportation yet because we kind of would like to get a better feel of which of these particular plans we're going towards. And I don't know, board, I'm sure you're hearing a lot of good opinion here. So I think we're probably going to be able to narrow this even after this evening. But yes, thank you for that. This is exactly what we're looking for.
Be better about asking our questions. Hi, I'm Sherry Medini. I wondered, timeline-wise, I know you probably have a little bit more of a timeline regarding transportation, but also what's best education-wise, the reasons behind what you're doing, the reasons behind segmentation, what can we look to expect? And then the other piece is kind of to your point that I feel like we should, are you guys able to gather data from people in the area? I know, I have friends in New Jersey that do pre-KK and then 1 through 4, and, that information, that data's there.
Yes.
And I think it would be helpful to us in the community to be able to look at that as well.
Okay.
Some of that objective data. I know Pequay Valley is doing a lot of interesting, different kind of things and heading towards that 21st century learning, and it seems to be working really well. So if we can put some of our own minds at ease that we know neighbors have done it and it's going great.
Sure.
I think that'll help ease the transition as well.
We can absolutely share some of that information. And right now, you can find a lot of information on our website. You can find the whole videotaped presentation from the last community forum. I forgot to tell you that we're videotaping this one too. So if anyone's in a witness protection program, I'm sorry about that. But yes, we can add some of that information if that is helpful.
And timeline-wise, I'm curious, like,
Yeah,
where
so
you guys are at. I know we're looking, 4
we have
or 5
at
years
least
into the
3
future.
years to make a decision at
Okay.
this point. So we have deliberately been taking our time with this. We have deliberately been asking anyone and all of you to contribute your information. We're going to take information from tonight and caucus again. Please watch our board agendas. We talk about this pretty much at every meeting, at our committee of the whole meeting, which happens on the first Tuesday of the month, 7 o'clock in our boardroom. That's where the board hears presentations and we talk a lot. RLPS has spent a lot of time there. And then the third Tuesday of the month is when we vote. No vote will be taken on any of this without more input from the public. So we're probably maybe at least 2 years away from making a final decision here. There will probably be at least one more community forum as we look to narrow the number of options and provide more information so that everybody has a level of comfort for where we're going. Certainly we're not going to make everybody happy, but we're going to do the best we can.
I feel like a lot of times we're just looking, we don't always have the information. Like you said, we're coming, every person's story is a little bit different.
Sure.
But if we can kind of look at the bigger picture,
Yep.
take that data, apply it to Lidditz, it's the best we can do.
Thank you very much.
Don't go anywhere. Excuse me, I'm Becca Resnick, sorry. I'm a parent at Kissel Hill. And first of all, I am so glad that we're looking at the future, kind of piggybacking on what Sherry said. I'm glad we're considering options no matter how we land. So that tells me we're doing the right thing. We know things are going to change and we need to change with them. So I'm glad about that. I pretty much wanted to clap after everybody spoke tonight about all the community points, both the community within the school, keeping the 5th and 6th graders younger by keeping them within the K-6 structure. And it's mutually beneficial when you can have 6th graders reading to 1st graders and have 4th graders working with kindergartners and all that wonderful learning that happens. When the kids are familiar with the building and the kids both above and below them, and the administrators, and then you create those bonds with your principal and your school counselor and your learning facilitator and the lunch ladies. I mean, all of these things are so important. And we were talking about how, you know, here at Warwick, and I'm so glad you do stress the arts, and I love that because I know some other districts have not been doing that as much in recent years, and the athletic is a huge piece of this. But part of what I think is a huge piece of that is the community and the family. And I want to make sure that stays within our current building system, and I fear that with the extra modifications in option A and option B, we're going to lose some of that. I also worry about the transportation and the busing, and do I have to pick up from here and here? And I feel like one of the great things is going to be next year when I'm going to one building and I'm picking up both my kids and we're all reunited at the same time versus, okay, quick, we got to go and get this child. And I just think that would be a shame to lose that. My other point is sort of echoing what Alexis said, is I am all for 21st century learning, but can we do that within the current K-6 grade structure we currently have? And I'm wondering, could we go back to that cost slide, because I couldn't write fast enough, but the first...
Which one?
The maintaining the current K-6, the base plan. So it seems like that's about $20 million cheaper, and we can still do the 21st century learning, which is great, within the current K-6 grade structure versus doing the 21st century learning and making all these other adjustments. I believe option A and option B were in the $70 million.
Right, but they all, including this one, include 21st century.
Right, and that's wonderful.
Yes.
So I'm saying my vote would be to do the 21st century learning at the 52, which I want anyway. I want to keep K-6, but it seems like a bargain that we can get it for 52 million instead of 72. I'm just saying. And
Oh, I'm sorry. I misspoke.
Okay.
This is just the updating of systems.
Okay.
This does not include the 21st century.
Okay.
Thank you for correcting
A
me.
and B does include
A
a
and
level
B.
of 21st century learning. In A and B, there's 21st century learning built in. But with that being said, there is a range depending upon what each district, what level they want to do upon each classroom.
Okay, and certainly then within the 52, I mean, you can probably do $20 million worth of 21st century learning and get at the current rate. That aside, I'm glad you're having these community forums and listening. I'm also a little curious because I feel like the overwhelming response is maintain the current building structure, both tonight and from what I'm talking with and the parents that I talk to, and I'm just wondering, how much weight does that have?
It has lots of weight. Obviously, the input that you all provided to us and those who were here at the other community forums and the other community forum and through the focus groups took us from, you know, closing 2 schools and building one new one to closing 1 school down to these options. So what you have to say tonight is very important to us, or we would not be here tonight. So it does hold a lot of weight, and believe me, we hear what you're saying. The board is all here. They're hearing what you're saying. Hi.
Hi, I'm Susan Vasallo, and I have a first grader at Kissel Hill. I have not heard any of the numbers as to like how many kindergartens would you be putting in one building? How many 4th grades would combine into one building? Can you just give me a quick, would you make 15 classroom, like 15 4th grades would come together? Because my point to that is I have 3 first grades at Kissel Hill.
Mm-hmm.
It's a phenomenal. John Beck, I can say everything that you said about John Beck to Kissel Hill.
Mm-hmm.
Phenomenal. And I appreciate that my child can be grouped for the math that he needs, he can be grouped for the reading that he needs, and every child can be grouped for those things.
Absolutely.
So then I want to know, how do your teachers feel? They're working in teams of 3, they've got good bonds with each other, and now you're going to put them in with 15. What happens to those bonds? What do your teachers want?
So our teachers were able to participate in a focus group as well. They were able to take a survey. They were able to give us input. And the first thing I want to say is, hands down, we have the best staff in Lancaster and Lebanon County. And I say that because I've worked in other places, and I'm very, very blessed to be colleagues with the teachers that we have here. And I'm not just saying that to you tonight. I truly believe that. Our teachers work very closely together, whether they're in the same building or they're in different buildings. So when we have professional development and in-service days, we put those teachers of like grade levels together, of like subject areas together. So there are already some bonds formed there. By all means, I'm not saying that, you know, a team of 3 is not as good as a team of 15, but certainly we would make that work. We call ourselves the Warwick family for a reason, because we share the same ideal that we're going to do everything we possibly can to help students be successful, whether we're at Kissel Hill or John Beck or the middle school or the high school or wherever we are. So that's not of concern for me. I hear what you're saying. I will say this, and as just a little bit of a pushback on that, if there are 12 classes in a building, we can certainly level even better than we could if there are only 3 classes if we're moving students by ability. If there are 12, you have more opportunities to put students with like needs together. Again, that is, please don't misunderstand me that I'm saying that's what I'm advocating for. I'm just saying there are pros and cons to all of these options.
My name is Lisa Ruth, and I have 3 students at Kissel Hill this year. We flipped through these first 3 slides, or the first slides really quickly. What is the benefit, or what is the pro of option A and B over the baseline? Maybe I'm missing something obvious, and you already mentioned that 21st century learning is not in this baseline cost. But what benefit do you see, or what benefit does RLPS see to options A and B? I think at the first meeting we talked about just the flatlining or the declining population of the Warwick students. Is that really the driver of looking at these options, or?
So the driver of looking at an option with the declining students would be to close a school. We're not looking to do that. We've heard the feedback. The board is committed to continuing to keep all of our existing buildings in place. Certainly, anytime you have an opportunity like this where you're looking to overhaul your building based on systems and things that are needed to be done, you're going to look at research to see what's best for kids as far as teaching is concerned. And I think I've addressed this a few times. Putting students of like grade levels together allows you to program specifically for pre-K and K if that were the option that we would choose. It would be early literacy. We would be able to put specialists in there to help students with that early reading, those early math skills, if that's something that we chose to do. The same is true for 5th and 6th, and I think I talked about that with someone else who asked a question over here, to really focus on social and emotional and to create libraries that had, materials there that would be focused on students of that age and ability level, et cetera. As I just addressed up here, if there are 12 classes of a grade in one place, you have the opportunity to really group kids of like abilities in contrast to what we're doing now, where there may only be 3 classes of a grade level, and you've got students of pretty diverse ability levels. Having more kids grouped together allows you to provide more specific, detailed instruction to groups of students. Again, I'm not advocating for either of these, but there's certainly educational research on both sides of those coins. Hearing you talk about the community of a K to 6, we love that as well. Doing specific programming for students in specific grade levels, there's also research to show that can be beneficial as well. So we're just looking at options at this point.
Okay. And I will say, like, having a 6th grader, I can see that having the 5th and 6th grade separate would benefit my student. I think he would appreciate. So I
have one too.
So I think like change is scary to people. Yeah. And it's good to consider all the options. It is good to hear some of the benefits to
Sure.
that of some of these other options.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you. There was a hand over here earlier. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Dan Sod. We have 3 daughters at Bondfield this year and loving it. So just 2 real quick questions. So speaking to the decline of population, what does the future data say, knowing that there's not a lot of development happening? What kind of projection over the next 10 years
Flat.
will that be? So not declining more, but
More
flattening
flat.
out.
Yes.
Okay, so my question had to do with if we were declining further, you had considered maybe we would close an elementary school. Would that be something we would be looking at in the next 10 years? So,
I don't think in the next 10 years, but certainly every time a building comes up to be reassessed and the other buildings are on a different time schedule than these three, we will always be evaluating what makes the most sense to give our kids the best educational experience and being fiscally responsible.
and then another very quick question. I'm guessing most of us in this room, when we had little ones, we figured out pre-K and kindergarten and all those preschool programs for our own kids. But I know the data supports a lot for pre-K programs. So tell us a little bit about what pre-K counts would cover lengthwise, and also what would fall under that grant.
I'm going to bring in my expert, Dr. Melanie Callender, our assistant superintendent, who is overseeing this grant now. It's a little different than when I wrote it 10 years ago, so I'm going to let Dr. Callender address it.
Thank you for asking this question, because I love to talk about pre-K. We are looking at a grant for a half-day program to provide 2 sessions at this point at Kissel Hill Elementary School that would serve all of our elementary buildings. So any student who would be in need. The need ratio is based off of poverty level, but certainly families from a variety of income levels can be eligible based on the amount of children and family members that they have within their household. Our focus is going to be on literacy and early numeracy, and that's what we're going to be building the foundations for, so that they are more successful when they get to the kindergarten level. Did you have specific questions about the program and what it looks like?
Maybe the length of time that the grant would cover costs, so we have to decide.
The grant is an annual grant. However, people who are receiving the grant, as long as they continue to apply for the grant and have a similar structure, they can typically receive that grant ongoing. So for instance, the one that Dr. Hershey mentioned was in existence for 6 or 7 years. Conestoga Valley, who we work closely with to create our grant, they also have one that's been in existence for several years and has been successful. The grant operators also look for expansion. So one of the things that we would be looking at is establishing a program, working through what would be best practice within that program, and then expanding it to more buildings if we need to service more students.
And I believe that you had asked Elaine about, what happens when the grant funding goes away. I believe that our board is committed to providing pre-K as needed to students. And so if that's something that we would need to assume, I believe that's a cost we would be prepared to assume. Other questions?
My name is Patrick Brandt. We currently have a daughter at John Beck. She's really enjoying it. We love the school, and we have 2 more kids that are going to be coming up through the district. I don't want to speak for everybody here, but it sounds like from those that spoke, it seems like the majority of people are in favor of this baseline, kind of keeping as much the same as possible. One of my fears in looking at this, noticing that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it doesn't have the 21st century piece, and does this also not have the pre-K piece as well?
No, it doesn't have the pre-K piece in here. However, at this point, the district is committed to moving forward with that.
Okay.
I feel very confident that we're going to get this grant this year. So we are looking to move forward with pre-K for those students in need for at least the first year or so.
Okay.
Okay?
My fear is that the community might want to go with a plan where a lot stays the same with less transitions and everything that's been mentioned, but the district might want to move forward with something with, kind of looking towards the future with the 21st century buzzwords and everything else that you hear. Is there a reason why that's not included in this plan with the difference in cost being so significant? I'm kind of curious as to why we can't add that piece into it.
We absolutely can. We can absolutely add the 21st century piece into the baseline.
Okay.
But we wanted to show the community what is the bare minimum that we could do because we believe in being fiscally responsible. So we wanted to show you what would it cost to bring the HVAC up to speed and to do the building envelope and those sorts of pieces. That's why this looks this way. That doesn't mean that we might not take parts and pieces of the other that you've seen to put into here.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I believe with, those young kids that the less transitions, the better. I know my daughter, this is the first year John Beck's done their school families where it's a mixture of K through 6, and she loves it. She loves seeing the 6th graders and the 5th graders and getting to work with them and interact with them. And it would be a shame to see that disappear. And I know she's looking forward to being in school with her 2 younger brothers at the same time. And with the opinions of the community building and everything else that makes Warwick a great district, I would hate to see that disappear purely for, the 21st century piece or something like that. So I would love to see that added into this baseline if that would be possible.
So again, 21st century is not going to eradicate community. It's not going to change anything except for the fact that it's going to reinforce those 4 C's that we talked about: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. That's what 21st century means. Okay?
And again, there was that slide that said what 21st century learning cost was, and it gave a range that was 17.5% to 22.5%. So just doing the rough numbers, if you're taking 20% on a $50 million project, you're going to be adding to that. It gets us up closer to what projects A and B were that included the 21st century learning. So again, you'd be able to apply that same philosophy, the 17.5 to 22.5%, to the $52 million, depending upon what level of 21st century learning we bring in. But the numbers are there just based off prior projects and what that 21st century learning and soft costs add up to.
There's another hand up back there. I'm sorry, Craig was going that direction. Go ahead, Rainey.
Dr. Hershey, would it be correct to think that 21st century learning, the teachers in Warwick School District have all been trained in that? Would it be more of a, per se, a philosophy often that we could say that 21st century is already happening in many of the classrooms today
And I believe
without the physical
Yes.
features?
I believe I addressed that in one of the other answers, that we've been planning for this for the last 2 years in the lead up to one-to-one as well. Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Morrell. There was one more hand up there.
There's just one more thing I wanted to say about the 5th and 6th. If they get separated, which I'm going to look into, because I believe that you guys definitely know the curriculum can be much more centered and direct towards them, which must be fabulous and wonderful, and I'm sure it is. I want to make sure that we also are thinking of things, though, as balanced as well, because I think sometimes our kids are unbalanced these days because they're not having enough. I love outdoor time, and I love activity in the kids too, but if it's so centered in just their level, like they're getting a lot of social and different things from being the older kids in the school, because once you get to middle school, then you're down on the lowest spot on the totem pole again, and again it happens in high school, like we've said. But I just think that we should remember everything as a scope, and does it outweigh the benefits of the curriculum? Because it might. I have to look into that more, because it just might. But to make sure that the kids are well-rounded, and that because you're taking them out, it doesn't take away other things.
Yeah, I like those words, well-rounded. That's something that's very important to us. So that's why we do continue to have an emphasis on the arts, athletics, and altruism. We want our students to be well-rounded. We want them to be community-minded, and the first place they learn that is in their school. Thank you for that. All right, I think we're about to wrap it up for this evening. Craig, I think we have one more question here. Oh, no. Sorry. 2 more.
Sorry, Mitchell Swords. I'm a taxpayer, and I also have 4 little kiddos that are going to Lidditz-El, and we love it. We're so excited. We've had great experiences at Lidditz-El. We're very pleased. And also the administration has been great with meeting our needs as well, with getting our kids to school in the morning, walking every day in the rain and the snow and the ice, and every other 3 months of March that we've had this spring. So one thing that I wanted to look at with option A. We're looking at this 3 years down the road. Well, my children right now are 7, 5, and 3 and 1. So they'll be around 11, 9, and all the way down to 5. So when they're going into kindergarten, my wife will be getting all those kids to 3 different schools. And so for us, it's a very difficult feat on a daily basis to get our kids to all those different schools. And so that's one concern that we have as for our own kids. And so we're in favor of option, the baseline, but I'm a huge advocate of the 21st century learning with creative learning spaces and being able to have adaptive groupings within the grade levels. And so I'm a huge advocate of that, having the internet speed to be able to compete and be able to do things with creative media production and things to show the kids and to show the world what we're doing at Warwick. So I'm excited about that opportunity, but concerns with, if we go with option A, how is that going to affect our community as we train our children up to be holistically well-balanced in a community? And we don't see that when it's just pre-KK. And like you said, the research is mixed, depending on where you look. Right. But looking at that, sixth graders being able to read to first graders and being able to do those fast facts with the kids at the end of the day and first thing in the morning is a beautiful thing to see. So thank you.
Thank you, Mitchell. And we had one more question right here.
Hi, Bunny Buckwalter. Just a question on design. Is a value engineer being involved in the design and implementation phase of it? And the reason I ask that is back when I was on the school board, back when Bonfield was built, and we had a value engineer involved, and that school was brought in at the lowest cost per square foot of any school in the state of Pennsylvania that year or for 5 years going forward. So I think it's very important to have that aspect involved.
Thank you. As always, it will be our goal to do this in the most fiscally responsible way. Craig, did you want to say anything about that?
I think as we go forward, and we really haven't started design, so to speak, at this point, but as we move forward, every step along the way, we're going to be kind of assessing those costs, assessing the things that we're putting into the schools and what we're not putting into the schools as it relates to cost. And so that's really an ongoing process. One of the beauties of kind of our practice is we work in the private and public sector, so we get to interface with a lot of different contractors that give us a lot of feedback on cost-effective solutions to different problems within buildings. And so all of that kind of gets embedded in the design that we come forward with as it evolves.
So that's going to conclude our time together tonight. I cannot thank you enough for your commitment to our school district and your constant support. Please, if you have additional feedback or input, you can use that email address I gave you earlier, feasibilitystudy@warwicksd.org, or you can email me directly or any member of our team that you heard from tonight. Tonight's presentation, PowerPoint, and a full videotape of tonight's presentation will be available on our website within the next few days. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you.